Welcome to episode 130 of the Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce. I'm your co-host Isaiah Bollinger, and I'm back with Tim on a very exciting day with a very exciting guest. Although I guess not necessarily exciting for a lot of people. We won't go into the politics of we won't ruin the episode with politics. We
Yeah, I
only got
mean,
an
we're,
hour.
we're we're recording this the day after the U.S. elections, but we're not going to talk politics today.
It'll get posted later on, so by then people have already forgot and moved on, and it won't matter anymore.
So Tim Peterson here. The couple things that I want to just mention. One is that it's going to be 80 degrees in New York today in November,
I'm
which
sweating right. I'm literally like sweating right now.
short sleeve shirts, shorts. I put shorts back on today. I am just shocked, but there it is. It's going to be 80 today. I also want to continue our tradition of shout outs to favorite listeners who reach out and say that they're enjoying the podcast. One of those is Rebecca Lawton Flatters. She's the CEO of a women's fashion accessory business, and I've worked with her in the past, and she is an avid listener. So hello, Rebecca. Also, Betsy Emery Martin, who I've mentioned a number of times. She's someone I've worked with as well in the agency world and the startup world. She's an avid listener. Ritesh Patel. I didn't know he was a listener, and I met with him recently about a potential business deal. And he said, "Oh, by the way, on your podcast," and he started telling me about something. I was like, "Oh my God, you listen to the podcast!" So I was really, really pleased to hear from those, including many, many, many other old friends who we often hear from. So please reach out. I'm happy to mention you, if I can in our time. It's really great to have you listening and keep it up. And now I'm just going to pause for a moment to insert our sponsor mention, and then I'm going to throw it back to Isaiah to introduce our very special guest today. Balance is a B2B e-commerce payment solution that works well for you and for your buyers. It offers a seamless one-click checkout for almost any payment method, including ACH, wire, checks, cards, even terms. It's used by leaders in B2B e-commerce, and it's as easy as buying a shirt from Amazon. Check them out at getbalance.com. Book a session and tell them what your needs are. They are the first dedicated payment platform for B2B e-commerce, 100% tailored to your needs. Thanks again to our sponsor, Balance. Isaiah, please introduce our special guest.
Yeah. We have obviously big news that was announced Monday, or I guess depending on when this will go live, it'll be the previous Monday. So only a couple days ago, Evan and I have been working together for probably like 6 months now, but really 3 months of pretty heavy integration work, and we finally pulled off. Zaelab has acquired Trellis. We're merging together. The owners of Trellis are staying on, so it's a bit of a merger too. I don't like completely using the word acquisition because like people think we're just like going away.
You're not out in the street, Isaiah. You're not
And
out in the street.
yeah, we are very heavily invested in the Zaelab Trellis future, and Evan is the CEO and founder of Zaelab. So welcome, Evan, and yeah.
Yeah, great to be here, Isaiah, and I'm really excited about this partnership, which is what it is, and ultimately, it's rare that you find people that really have such strong conviction and knowledge around the B2B commerce ecosystem, and that's what we saw in you and Trellis, and I think the the power of what we can do together is going to be quite exciting.
Yeah, I always used to say like, I guess even just a week ago when we weren't formally together, one entity, like I felt like we were kind of moving in the direction of becoming the top B2B commerce firm, and I was like, who else is out there? And it was probably you guys, right? Like there wasn't a lot of other firms that I felt were like formidable, kind of with the level of knowledge and expertise to execute complex B2B projects, and you guys are one of the few. So yeah, we felt it was obviously better together than apart. So yeah, tell us the story. I mean, you've been doing this for what is it, 12, 13 years, or when did it
Yeah.
start?
Yeah, good question. Well, look, it started kind of on a personal journey. When I was a student, and I didn't really care too much for school and math and science. I really I caught a bug. I was always into technology and entrepreneurship, and when I was in middle school, I started a wholesale B2B e-commerce store. And
No way. Really?
how it all began, and this was kind of
What
as
were you
the
selling? What were you...
selling these boxes of wholesale DVDs. So if you've ever gone into like a store and the bins of like random
Yeah, yeah,
DVDs, and so I found a vendor that had, basically would sell them to me in boxes of like 100, 200. And, at the time when DVDs were big, these stores needed to fill their bins. And so I started an online store selling wholesale DVDs. And, I was probably 13 at the time. And, my parents are like, what are you doing on that computer thing? And, I was making, more money than I think a 13-year-old should make. Um, and what we did was, we just kept kind of selling these and people would buy them. And so I was just super passionate early, very passionate about e-commerce and technology. And, that really solidified for me the excitement around e-commerce and the fact that, you can sit on your couch and, create money. From there, really, Zaelab started. I got out of college. I worked at a couple of jobs and, I saw an opportunity. Originally, we were, born out of the Hybris SAP ecosystem, and we became like one of their top partners. Our first client was General Electric, and so from there we really learned about what does it take to deliver on a complex e-commerce initiative. And inch by inch, we just kept growing the company. And today we're now 250 people across 20 plus countries, completely focused on B2B commerce. So it's a really exciting time for us. And I think, Isaiah, as you alluded to, the opportunity for B2B companies is so substantial. They're dealing with a lot of complexity. They're behind the times, relative to their B2C peers. And what they need is partners that really understand their space, but also have the full breadth of capabilities to be able to service them. And that's what I'm excited with what Trellis and Zaylab can do together.
So I want to just throw something out there before we get into more details about Zaylab and Trellis and how they're going to work together. General Electric, my listeners have heard this story before, but I want to throw it out to you because it's really weird. They were my first big client when I started a
Wow.
business as a young person, and I found it shocking. And I was like, a kid. I was in my teens. I started this business, and I kind of knocked on doors, and I wanted to do printing. And this is ages ago. It's like it was a pre-internet business, and so I ended up doing their annual reports.
Oh, wow.
So it's just weird that it's
I've
General
read some of those,
Electric.
Tim.
What's that? Isn't that,
I've
isn't
read
that
many of those.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so that was like one of those things where I came in and I said, I can do it cheaper and better than your current arrangements. And it turned out to be like, okay, they'll say yes. But I just find it amazing that's also part of your story that, General Electric, which was a behemoth. I mean, it's just really
Yeah.
incredible.
They're coming back a little bit, right? I think like the stock is starting to improve a little bit. I know they had like a really bad downturn, probably because they weren't adopting B2B commerce fast enough, or who knows.
I think there was some other funny business
Yeah,
going
there's other issues,
Yeah, there's
but
always something.
um yeah, I think what's interesting about how you guys started is a little bit of a different platform path. And on the Trellis side, we've been a little bit, I would say, biased towards Magento, Shopify, BigCommerce. I'd love to hear your thoughts on SAP Hybris. I know the big platforms you guys do, SAP Hybris, Commerce Tools, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, and then now Shopify is kind of newer. So I would love to like hear maybe that evolution of like, how that actually, I think you started in Magento a little bit and then you moved into so maybe you could like talk about the like platform kind of, and obviously you saw some value in what we were doing, so you obviously see value there too.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, when we started, we were born into the Hybris. I was actually one of the early Hybris. I did a brief stint at another e-commerce agency before I started Zaelab, which was one of the first hybris agencies when they merged with Icongo. And, at the time it was the platform, right? Any company that was looking at commerce, hybris was on the short list. It was a great company at the time. Karsten Tomo was leading the company, super entrepreneurial. They really had the market presence. And what we liked about it was, look, for our focus in complex B2B commerce, it really did, meet the needs of, businesses that were operating globally, that had complex pricing, complex business models. And at the time it was the platform. And so we did really, really well with that for a number of years. Obviously, a couple of years back, the world started changing and, ultimately, the commerce platform market has changed. Isaiah, when we started this business, when you started this business, it was, we as a SI could, really sit outside one of these big vendors.
Yeah, for us it was Magento. Yeah, I mean we were growing, considerably year after year, just mostly focused on Magento. We picked up Shopify, but for a while it was Magento until the Magento 2 debacle.
And so, at some point, a couple of years back, we started to think about the future and realize, ultimately a couple of things were true. One was that, commerce platforms and commerce kind of more broadly was becoming a commodity,
Hmm.
right? It was, it's like electric, right? You turn on your light switch, you don't know how you get it, you don't care how you get it, and it just
You
works.
turn on Shopify. I mean, I think Shopify has a big part to play in that, to be honest. They
Sure.
I
really
agree.
help. Yeah.
I,
Yeah, I mean, Shopify has done, an incredible job of, building something that's easy for companies to get up and running, right? That's, low costs of operations. And so, I think the platform market is interesting. And, I think for us though, today, obviously with Trellis, we now support, pretty much all the major platforms. And, we're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to be ahead of, where the platforms are going. But I think what's really important for us is that, increasingly, as we grow the business, as we've established Zaelab, our focus and what we want to make sure of is that, yes, we're bringing commerce knowledge, we're bringing the knowledge of these platforms, right? Our customers, they want to build a house, right? They want to live in that house. And ultimately, they don't really care, are you building that with a Milwaukee tool or a DeWalt tool or a what tool? And so our perspective is that, for us, we want to really focus and first and foremost, how do we help our clients solve their top business challenges? How do we help them transform and deliver modernized selling experiences? And yes, we obviously have knowledge and expertise in, many of the major platforms that, our customers are thinking about. But ultimately, we want to be full service in that, we meet our customers where they are, right? And we meet them at the
Yeah.
platform that they're thinking.
I think you make a good point where the platform is a bit of a commodity now, and it's really more about the overall architecture, the strategy,
mhm.
The
and bring,
organization.
yeah, change management. There's just all these things that have to come into play. And so what are those problems that you generally, I mean, I know it's going to be very different depending on the business and the state of the business, but are there any like themes that you're seeing, you know,
Yeah.
adoption, pricing? What are the actual business problems? Forget the technology, I guess.
Yeah. So what we see in B2B companies is that, oftentimes we walk in and, they're dealing with experiences that just haven't kept with the times, right? So they're difficult to use. Maybe they don't have great product data. Maybe they're not, customers can't trust the pricing data that they're getting. And we often see that, these companies are struggling to, scale these platforms, right? So they're dealing with, they're spending too much time and too much money on the operations of the platforms as opposed to innovation, right? And doing things that are really going to move the needle. And so for us, what is unique about, Zaylab and Trellis now is, our focus is really on, how do we deliver modern selling experiences to, for our clients to deliver to their buyers, right? And when we think of modern selling experiences, we have a good, acronym based on our periodic table of B2B commerce that we call pacing, right? And our belief is that, modern selling experiences need to be personalized, they need to be automated, they need to be collaborative, they need to be integrated, they need to be nimble, and they need to be guided. And so, fundamentally what we see is that, the opportunity for us together is how do we level up what modern B2B selling experiences look like and how they function. And there's AI opportunities, right? We're seeing a lot of opportunities for, how can B2B companies leverage AI to significantly improve their operations. And so, when you think about these things, kind of our view is that B2B companies need a lot of help. They need a full service partner that, understands not just the experience side of it, but also the underlying complexity, the technology, the pricing, the go-to-market models, right? And so, I think the real need for B2B companies is that, they have a partner that ultimately can, help them on this transformation journey and, really not just be a technology partner, but be a business partner that, really understands where they're trying to get to from a business perspective and can shepherd them, and help them along that journey.
So I want to throw something out there that I've increasingly seen at other agencies, let's say that I've worked with, partners that I've worked with from some of the clients I know. So there are a lot of, there seems to be more and more of a focus lately on the customer and the client being part of panels, customer panels on the inside, also to inform, the modern selling approach, making sure that you're actually listening to everyone across the board you should be listening to. Is that something that Zaelab has also seen or something that you've seen through some of your clients?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Tim. I think there's a little bit of a nuance between B2C and B2B in this regard, right? I think B2C obviously much more mature, in terms of experience and, what customers expect and, we're all buyers. The reality of B2B and is we've talked to, hundreds of, B2B buyers, right? And by the way, a B2B buyer is a totally different persona oftentimes, right? In a B2C context, you're dealing with an individual. Oftentimes in a B2B context, you're dealing with an account, a company, and the purchasing mindset, right? And decision making, is a totally different criteria oftentimes than a B2C customer. And so, while we've talked to hundreds of customers and understood their pain points, we've generally, we think there's still such an opportunity that B2B customers just don't know what they want and don't know what they need yet. And the reality is that, we've certainly used research and panels and informed some, customer insights into how we think about delivering modern selling experiences. But the opportunity that we see is that we still think we still think the bar hasn't been set around B2B
Do,
experience.
Yeah.
do you feel,
And
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. This
yeah,
reminds me almost of like the what's that old saying where he's like, if you asked everyone they would say they want a faster car, a faster horse.
exactly.
Henry Ford. Yeah.
Yeah, the Henry Ford quote. Do you feel like that's kind of what's happening where if you go and ask your B2B customers what they want, they're like, we want a faster horse, but really it's like you're trying to build the car or whatever. Like,
Yeah, I think it's really similar. That's a great analogy, Isaiah. I think that what we see is that, there's companies that spend months and months upon months, doing customer insight, panels, research, et cetera. And don't get me wrong, that's all important foundational information. You really need to understand the customers. But what we see is that the customers that are doing really exceptional, they're doing more of a let's try, learn, listen approach, right?
hmm,
And really take more of an agile mindset to how they deliver modern selling experiences. Because again, I don't think, and the big thesis behind our business now and has been is that what's great in B2B is still yet to be defined. And we think that's really where the opportunity is right, collectively Zaelab and Trellis really defining what do exceptional modern B2B selling experiences look like. And there's some good examples out there, but largely we think that area still is hugely lacking innovation. And I could talk to customers all day long about, what they think and what they want. And that's informative, but ultimately we have to try, test, learn, do with our customers, and our customers that take that approach of really being agile, testing, launching, doing, and then coming back and hearing how customers are receiving it. Those are the ones that are seeing the enormous growth, right? And so
I,
it's a combination.
I think what you landed on is something that we were talking about, I think, with another guest a while back. It's like, why is there no like agreed upon best practice, let's say guidebook for B2B e-commerce yet? It's because it's all a work in progress, right? It's not
Yeah.
there yet,
Yeah.
right? It's not like we
Yeah.
could say we're done. Here are the 100 things you need to do. Everyone go do those and we'll move on to something else.
Yeah.
We're still at that
I,
stage where it's getting better and people are learning a tremendous amount, but it's still not like here are
I
the
I agree with that, but I also still think there are some basics that just the
oh yeah.
average company, especially like the small mid-sized distributor manufacturer, doesn't have down yet, like real-time pricing. Like,
Hmm.
they might have it in the ERP, but then it doesn't work on the website. Like, there's still a lot of companies just failing at the basics, but I definitely agree. Like, you got to get past the basics and move to something more innovative. And I think that's also why when companies do the basics, they assume that all of a sudden they're going to have like 100% adoption and these massive results. And it's like, you only did the basics. You need to do something a little more innovative beyond that to get, what if you were to like put if you were in charge of some of these companies, what are the bets or the tests that you would run? Like, I know you talked about guided selling, AI, automate, like, I assume you'd put some bets in some of those areas. Like, what would that look like? Or maybe is there anyone that you can talk about like that tangibly?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I think Isaiah, you hit a really important point, which is, you got to have the basics and the foundation, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think first and foremost, these companies, what we see is, sometimes if you're on a shaky foundation, like I said earlier, you're spending so much time and energy and money on operations, and you're not really at a point where you can innovate. And so I think first and foremost, B2B companies need to make sure, hey, am I on a scalable platform, right? And that's hard for another thing you mentioned, which is, yes, pricing's in ERP, accounts are in ERP. The reality is these systems and these businesses oftentimes were not built with today's world in mind, that they're going to have real-time experiences and they're going to need to do self-service. And so a lot of our work with customers is really putting that foundation in place. And so I think that's really important. So once you have that, look, AI is obviously a word that's used quite liberally. And it's often, and that's probably a whole nother podcast. But the reality is that we are seeing companies that have, real business problems, right? And I'll talk about a customer, one of our larger manufacturers, that is basically, 50, 60% of their orders on, a couple $1 billion are coming in via email,
Hmm.
right? So they have thousands of customer service reps. And what's happening is, customer service rep receives a PDF, a purchase order. They turn around, they manually enter this. That's expensive. There's mistakes.
Hmm.
And so, with this customer, what we're doing is we're using AI to actually do some, interesting ingestion of those PDFs. So imagine a world where, customer sends the purchase order or sends an order right to an email address, and that order is automatically parsed and ingested, into the commerce platform. And, that's just one example of, if you think about the business, outcome of reduce cost of orders, reduce mistakes of orders, and having to deal with returns and resolving that. Um, and so from an AI perspective, I think there's an incredible amount of use cases that are opportunities for B2B companies. But then the other thing is, I think what we also see is that, often in a B2B context, your customers, as I said, they're typically accounts, but even within these accounts, we're not dealing with one type of persona. We have manufacturers that, some of the users are engineers and they really want technical specifications. For them, it's most important that, I need to be able to find the right product for my application. And by the way, that's usually not like a picture because they all may look the same, but it could
I mean, it's a
be
diagram or exploded visualization, and
or a
yeah,
technical specification or
yeah,
wattage or strength or whatever it is. And so, that's one example, but there's other personas. Often in these B2B commerce portals, we have customers that are, procurement, right? Or buyers or category managers or whatever it may be. And so, if I were in, if I was running a company, I'd really think about, what does my experience need to look like? Right? And how do I personalize it for each of these distinct personas? They're all coming to solve different problems. The procurement person wants to look up invoices and deal with payments and, how much am I saving? The engineer
yeah.
wants to find, the product that fits perfectly in his or her application. And so I'd really think about, the personalization piece of this, which is, how do I help my customers solve their problems? And how do I make it easier to use for them? Because that's the thing that's going to be, helpful in terms of driving revenue or shifting market share, from going to another competitor's experience.
I mean, one of the things that I think you're bringing up that a number of our guests have brought up is really about, what the business needs versus just the blind focus like on e-commerce, right? I mean, this is something that I love coming back to because there are some folks that I've worked with where they're bringing me as a consultant and they're saying something like, we need to replace the platform, right? And then of course it circles back to all of the things we're already talking about here, where it's like, well, is that really what you need to do, right? You need
Yeah.
all of these
Uh,
things going on in the business, right?
I
And
mean,
it may be some one of the things, but that is not necessarily going to
well,
solve
one of the
a
things
lot of
that
things.
has
Yeah.
been so hard for us in our business, and I'm sure it's a challenge for you in your business, Evan, is that in our combined businesses, is that like sales is not as simple as like to your point, Tim. Oh, Tim, they want this. Oh, we're just going to do it. But if you do it, it's going to fail. I mean, we kind of had this conversation in one of our previous
Yeah.
meetings where
Yeah.
their budget doesn't match what they want. The project's set up a failure. And I think that's one of the things that make is so why I'm such a believer in us being consultants is because a lot of deals come into me and, we have one that, we talked about yesterday where I think we're trying to convince them they need to spend a lot. They're on kind of a shaky foundation. They're trying to move to a better foundation, but the budget doesn't match what it's going to take to,
Yeah.
to build that better foundation. So I feel like a lot of what's happening in B2B commerce is clients have a certain idea of what they want or need, but what they really need is actually maybe something different. Maybe it's building a better foundation, which is going to cost a lot more than they think, or and so it's challenging because you have to shift these sales conversations because if you do what they say, it's ultimately going to fail. And
Yeah. Well,
so yeah, it's a hard thing to figure out as a sales rep because you want to take the money and of course as a sales rep you're like, oh, let's do this project. But
yeah.
Evan, as you know, as the owners, we don't want failed projects.
Yeah. Well, look, you guys bring up great points, and we see this all the time, and again, I think that's where kind of back to the beginning of this conversation about, yeah, we are experts and leaders in each of these e-commerce platforms, but what we often see is as you guys just mentioned, customers aren't always thinking about the holistic problems or opportunities, and so what we tend to do, we also see that in B2B, many companies have really challenged or are unable to effectively, and vendors and partners are really unable to effectively communicate what the economic impact or ROI on
Mm,
these initiatives are. And so one thing we've taken a lot of time, to build out, and we, do this with a lot of our strategic accounts when they're willing to engage in this way, is we've built out an economic impact model for B2B. And one of the things we've done is we've built out a full financial model for B2B specific use cases that really helps B2B companies start to understand, what are the economic impacts? What are the goals and priorities of doing B2B, right? Is it revenue growth? More often than that, what we see is it's really more about operational efficiency and
Mm.
productivity, like the use case that I mentioned around, order ingestion. And so one of the tactics we've done, I think in that situation, there's going to be a customer that just says, I just need a new engine and that's what I need and put it in place a commerce platform. But it's really a short-sighted view. So what we like to do is we like to work with our customers to really define, what is the economic impact? What is the business case? Why should my board, right? Why should my executive leadership team really care about? And that helps really define the overarching business goals and objectives of what we're trying to do. And then from there, yes, maybe that necessitates a new platform, right? Maybe it necessitates a new operational process being defined. Maybe it necessitates, an organizational rethink, right, around, the teams that support this. And so I think I think what we like to do, right, is really start from a place of, what's the economic impact? What's the business value? How is this going to transform my organization? And when we start there, what we find, Isaiah, is that, one, it helps the customer really understand what they're marching towards and actually start to quantify some of these things, which becomes a different conversation than just a technology conversation.
Well,
And
one of the most interesting engagements I had in recent years was with a company that's a sprinkler company, and they do sprinklers both for, residential and commercial, and also it's large industrial, for fire, prevention, whatever. So, but what's interesting is that they used to place orders, like they had all these complicated business processes, but they used to place orders like saying, well, for this quarter, we'll need this much pipe across all of these clients for all of these uses, for an example. But that really was not efficient for them. So then they start saying, the conversations went to, well, we need to actually place orders for each of the projects by category and determine, like, for each of these what the needs are so that we can have these things quicker and more accessible for this residential project on this date in this area of the country, right? So
yeah,
it was fascinating because basically the processes change, and then they just said, okay, how do we apply the technologies that we have, and what
Yeah.
technologies do we need in
And
order
I
to
think I
accomplish it,
think
right?
that's a lot of the problem, right? Is that these B2B companies are trying to buy technologies and cram them into processes from 1990 or
Yeah,
2005.
exactly,
And
exactly.
then it's like, well, yeah, of course a lot of these platforms aren't built to do that because, it's 2024 and then you're going to spend all this time and money retrofitting a modern platform
Yep.
almost backwards, right? And so
yeah,
I mean, I think some of that is also baked into these ERP systems that these companies can't get off of. I'm curious how much I mean, some of it I think is just change management. The companies don't want to change. Everyone's been doing things a certain way for 20 years and it's just you don't want to there's a cost to there is a short-term cost to like saying, all right, everybody, you got to do something differently, right? Like you're not immediately going to get ROI day one. But I also find that a lot of these companies are like almost like in ERP jail is how what I would call it. Where like they're so beholden to their ERP that and they're like they would never leave it and they're gonna do things the way the ERP does and it like almost dictates a good chunk of like how their business like do you find that with some of
yeah.
the I think it depends obviously on the organization, but we find that a lot.
Yeah, we see this a lot, and I think I think you guys brought up two really interesting points, and I think the most critical point is that what we often see is companies are thinking about the technology and not as much about the people and process. And what makes these transformations successful is when you're thinking about how does my business need to transform from a people, process, and technology standpoint. And if you're only focused on one of them, it's very unlikely that, the company is going to really get to where they need to get to. And then Isaiah, I think you brought up a really good point, right? Which is, oftentimes we see this, right? Kind of goes back to the point of so many of these organizations were built with technology and foundations that never really considered what the needs in 2024, 2025 actually are. And so, this is one of the more, and this is really where some of our architects and some of our engineers just have, such great experience in, what approaches can work to be able to really leverage those existing systems and as needed redesign those operational processes to be able to meet the needs of a real-time customer experience. But I would say, and I think you know this as well as I do, this is one of the more challenging aspects of our business, right? Is to be able to, hey, you know what? You're not going to change your ERP just to deliver this. So I need to work within the constructs of your technology and your business. And, again, we have a variety of technological approaches that we've done, be it caching or be it other technologies that enables us to, still work within those confines, but also deliver a real-time experience. And ultimately, Isaiah, I think, look, that's our secret sauce at the end of the day, right? Is that we know how to do that. And we know how to do it in a way that's going to scale, right? It's going to be able to perform. But ultimately, that's where we see these projects go sideways so many times is you have an agency, they understand the experience, they build you a great experience, but they don't understand, the operational processes or the underlying
Yeah.
ERP.
The overall architecture of they look at things in a silo. And we see
Mhm.
that all the time, right? Where people build this thing and it's really cool, but it lives in this little thing and it's not like, well, what about the ERP systems and the CRM and the PIM and all the other, things that go into success with these different systems. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the challenging things about being I know we've been maybe shifting towards the word consultancy. Tim, we'd love your opinion on this down the road of
Can we make
consultancy
a
versus agency, but ultimately what we're trying to accomplish is like, we get pigeonholed, I think, as a digital agency as just like the doers of tasks, when our value really is in the strategy and the architecture, and um, we're potentially shifting towards this word consultancy, but it's a hard shift because, that's just how the market has viewed people like us for so long, because
Well,
they're like, oh, you implement this thing,
I'll just say something that's relevant to this whole conversation on this, and then obviously we can talk about this later. But one thing that I've seen in my career is I've been on the brand side, right? I've been a head of e-commerce and whatever. I've been a marketer. I've been a head of an agency, right?
What haven't you
Right.
done, Tim? What
Oh,
haven't you done yet?
I don't know. I'll have to think about
You
that.
haven't done the manufacturing, have you? You haven't actually been on the manufacturing
I
plant.
have.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
Well, you're gonna have
Ah,
to on the
I
next
actually headed a
episode.
warehouse too. I've done all that. I've had a long career. But I guess where I was going to go with this is that one you're a lot of trouble, mister. You're funny.
I want
But
you to come up with what you haven't done in the next episode, and then we're gonna
I'm
make you
gonna
go
I'm
do
gonna
that.
find
And
something
we're
and
gonna
I'm
make
gonna
you
throw
do
it at
that
you.
one of our customers. That's what we're gonna.
I'll have to think about that very
It's like
carefully.
Trump
But
at McDonald's working at. We're gonna get you like a little hat, like working at
my God, don't even go there. But to get back to this one small point is that I think consultancies often were divorced from technology long
Well,
ago,
that's part of the problem, right?
completely divorced, right? But
And then
today,
they become this McKinsey bullshit where we're allowed to swear, by the way. We've decided we're
yeah, I mean, we can do it on this. We're okay with that. But see, that's I think the thing that has changed in recent years is that that's not the case with a lot of consultancies today. Depending on exactly, where you land and what you're talking about, you have tech teams, right? And you have
yeah.
people who implement, to actually make things real that are also parts of those groups. When I started in my career a million years ago, that was not really the case. Consultancies were like the thinkers over there in their
Yeah.
their suits and whatever, and
Well,
it was a very, very different world.
I think
So
the problem with that, to your point, is that when you're just the thinkers and you're just the strategy, and we see this too. I'm sure you've seen this, Evan, where like someone comes in and they're like, "We're just the strategy guys," and then they put in like the strategy, but they don't actually know how to do anything. So it doesn't work because it's like, how can you do the strategy if you don't actually know how to do the work, right? It's like it's like saying, "Oh, I'm going to be the architect for the building," but like we don't know how buildings work. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it's like you kind of need to know how everything works together to come up with a strategy so that it doesn't fit. Do you see what I'm
I
saying,
think
Tim? Like,
the bottom
yeah,
line for me, and I'll throw this back to Evan, is that I feel like you need to have people who are practitioners of whatever you
exactly.
do who are involved
Exactly.
in your business, right? And
Yes.
so I've been ahead of e-commerce, right? So when I go into a place and I say, look, I get it because here's what I used to have to do, and here's what I
Yeah.
understand, and here's the issue, and it's a very different conversation than when you just come in and say, well, here's everything that I think about transforming a business. It's a
Yeah.
very, very different conversation, you know.
Yeah, I think Isaiah, our challenge is, we're creating a category that, it used to be consultancies that, do the strategy and agencies that do the work. And yeah, I think that's part of our vision is to be able to, really help customers across both of those spectrums.
Both areas. And it's a lot of savings in that, right? Because the strategy we're thinking about, okay, where's the budget? Can they actually execute this? Where strategy people come in, come up with some grandiose idea. Maybe it sounds cool, but it can't be executed because there's no budget to back up the strategy. It reminds me of didn't this happen in New York where like I think it was New York where like they hired like the city of New York hired like McKinsey or Deloitte to like help with the trash, and they were like, "You just need trash cans." It was like
Yeah.
a
To
$4
help with
million
the math.
You
consulting
need a trash
project,
can.
and
Yeah.
it was like, "I've got this genius idea.
Oh my
It's
God.
called
I never
trash
thought of it.
cans.
I never thought.
They've been around for about 400 years. I don't know when they started, but like, isn't
All
this? I
right.
think this is a real thing,
A
right?
true
Like this.
story. Yes.
Yeah.
Happened.
We need like the Joe Rogan like whatever his guy is that like pulls this stuff up on the screen so he can Tim we're gonna request the like moderator guy that can like fact check us.
That would be really. They'll pop in. They'll pop in.
Yeah, and like send us the link to
Well,
the
but I'll give a real example for our listeners of something. So years ago, and I'm not going to name the business because it's too embarrassing for them. But there was this huge multi-million dollar consulting project that was going on about technological modernization, whatever. And they were, a brick and mortar retailer at the time. They had a catalog business. They also had, e-commerce sites, whatever. So B2C, right? However, they had nobody in this multi-million dollar team who actually had like retail experience or whatever. And so they're running around in a frenzy. And I get a call one day. It says, Tim, didn't you used to be a retail manager? And I said, yeah, I used to do. They said, we have no retail manager to consult because they don't know how to talk about anything. So it really is just a changed world now. You would never have a multi-million dollar project today for a B2C or a B2B business without having people who actually understand how things are supposed to be working there. You can't have a team of consultants show up
well,
who
yeah, that's
say,
the
I
problem.
don't
It's
know
like,
how
well, what
a
happens when you
retailer
just
is.
ship out the order, right? Like the order comes in and then it actually like that's the thing is e-commerce is like there's a whole like physical logistics piece to it that people forget about, right? Where it's like there's actually people in the warehouse. They're actually like logging in and processing orders. And I think a lot of people,
I think it's all
yeah.
drones and robots. I don't think they're
You
involved
just
anymore.
press a button and it just, yeah. I mean, that's how it feels like with Amazon, right? Like you don't see these like automated warehouses. I want to, because I know we only have a few minutes left. I think there's like three areas, Evan, that I see you really like leading the charge in. Well, many areas. So, but three big ones that I think are kind of on the like the leading edge that are pretty exciting, and maybe you can like tie them back to the economic impact idea. Um, we can go one at a time. Is like the guided selling. We didn't really get into that, what that really means. And then a little more into AI. I'd like to talk about that more and where you see that actually being useful, not just like
Yeah.
the and then the visualization piece because I'm really proud of that. I don't know if you saw the project we did with Airlift. It wasn't
Yeah.
quite
Great.
exactly the visualization that you've done on some of your other projects, but I think it ties a little bit into that, where you can see the configuration and it shows you like where the thing is actually in the car. So let's start with the guided selling. Like that's a big
What
part
is
of what
that?
what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can talk about guided selling, and we're really excited about guided selling. And I'll kind of frame this up in a couple of different ways. You know, first off, what we're seeing again in a B2B context is that search isn't good enough. As I mentioned before, hey, I'm an engineer, I'm searching for a product, a light bulb. You guys have 400 different light bulbs. They all have the same image, but very different wattage or K values or whatever it may be. And we started a partnership a couple years back with a company called Logic.io, which is, one of the leading guided selling and CPQ platforms. It's really built for composable, architecture. And one of the big things we've been doing with them is helping organizations that have kind of more complex products create these guided selling experiences, right? And a good example of this, I'll use a real world customer where they're in the business of selling power units in data centers. And what they struggled with is that, customers would come to their website, but, they couldn't exactly find what data power unit would really meet the needs of their application. And so we worked with them to really create an entirely new guided selling experiences that actually think of it as an interactive survey. And what it does is it basically asks the customer, hey, tell me a little bit about your application. And you enter some information about what are you trying to power? How long do you need it to run if the power goes down? And it takes them through a series of questions. And ultimately what it ends up with is, hey, based upon your specific application, we think these products are the best ones to meet the needs of your application. And we're seeing this opportunity for companies that's solving a few problems. One, it's helping their customers find their products that they need that are going to fit their application in a way that search just never could. But the second opportunity was we're seeing an impact on the sales teams. And so we had a good example of this as a medical device company that, basically sold these complex heart monitors for hospitals. And there's a lot of different variations of this. And their struggle was that it took them almost 6 months to a year to ramp up a salesperson because there's so
Wow.
much product knowledge.
Complicated. Yeah.
And then guess what? The average tenure for a salesperson was 13 months. So they spent 6 to 12 months ramping somebody up, 13 months to speed. That's right. And by the
You're
way,
just losing money every time you hire. It's just impossible that, yeah.
exactly. And the other issue that they had was, demographic shifting. There are people that had, 20, 30 years of product knowledge were leaving. They were retiring.
Yeah.
For this company, what they wanted to do was basically build a guided selling experience that would make it easier for their sales teams and their customers to really find what they're looking for. And again, this was hugely impactful because they took it down from 6 months of training down to 2 months, right? And their customers now could self-service and based on their hospital, figure out what they need. And so we're seeing an incredible uptick around guided selling, and it's really exciting.
I'm just going to throw a comment here on that. This is clearly one of the things B2B is learning from B2C because, people in furniture and home accessories and makeup and hair care and vitamins and supplements. I mean, 15 years ago when I was in a supplement business, we were doing this, right? So it's great to see B2B finally doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like a more complicated version of it, but basically it's the same,
Yeah.
yeah, people want the best sellers or, people don't want to have to just open an empty box and think, type in random words and then hope that maybe it's what they like.
Yeah, it's
People
for
are
makeup.
visual.
I worked
Yeah.
on a project with Sephora years ago, and it was like, what's your skin type? What's your skin tone? What's your, and
Yeah.
they had all these step-by-step things, and it's like, here are the products for you. Boom. And I'm so glad that this
So,
is finally happening.
so in the last few minutes, so I think we could probably do a whole new episode on guided selling. Maybe we bring on
Love to.
Steven or something like I think we could do something like that and have, the experts in that. We probably should do that. But let's come back to visualization, but AI, do you see it as just, augmenting product data, automating those POs? I mean, there's so many applications, but maybe just some quick wins that you see.
Yeah, some quick
Yeah.
wins, and I'd say the thesis is this, right? I think there's real AI opportunities. Yeah, product content, yeah, everyone's doing that. That's not, groundbreaking or revolutionary. I think the thing that B2B companies need to think about, so in the B2C setting, right, we're desperate to figure out who is this buyer, what is their intent, we're just
Yeah,
scratching
yeah.
any
Yeah.
data we can. Now think about a B2B organization, right? We have rich information about our accounts and what did they buy last year and what does that tell us that they're going to buy, or they bought this product and I know that means they need maintenance parts over the next 6, 12, 18 months. And so I think the AI opportunity is, and Isaiah, this is probably a whole episode, but the
Do it.
opportunity is huge. And just think about the data that B2B companies have available to them that will tell them what their customers should be buying
So
next.
predictive, personalization,
Mhm.
getting in advance. Hey, we think you're going to need maintenance in 6 months, or almost helping them so they don't have to think about it. That kind of, yeah, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
but it's
Is it?
not, hey, we think you like this, you may like this. More involved than
Yeah,
that.
we're projecting your oil change in 6 months. Is there anyone you see doing this? Like, have you done anything, or you feel like have you seen anything there with this?
Yeah, I mean, look, what we see is there's a maturity curve to B2B commerce, and so many companies are still building their foundations. But for companies that we've been working with for, any length amount of time that have solved that, we're doing some really innovative stuff for some large manufacturers that are completely transformative to their business. So I think we should do a whole episode on this.
I
Yeah,
would
yeah.
love to do that. And Hobart, who I've mentioned before, I worked with them. Their whole restaurant supply business is really heavily reliant on AI now, saying like, these cruise ships that have 56 kitchens per cruise ship will need the following,
Yeah.
and it's really great for them.
And then visualization, I mean, I know you've worked with 3Kit. I mean, I think we're still in the very early stages of that, and it's
Yeah.
getting cheaper. The 3D modeling is getting cheaper, and I think that like I almost feel like images are going to be obsolete soon. It's like if you don't have like a 3D model or a 3D image, is that where you see things kind of going,
Well, I
with
think
that?
if you have a product that can be visualized, I think it's incredibly important. And so oftentimes, especially in the manufacturing space, we're dealing with really intricate components,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And so, the
That
ability to,
roll up, just to be clear, they roll up into a bigger thing. So it's components within, maybe a
yes,
large machine or structure, and it's super complicated. Yeah.
right. And so if you go look at like the mechanical world, right? And you go to there's millions of sites and manufacturers that have these schematics and CAD drawings, right? And they have, discrete part numbers. And so, I think the visualization opportunity to be able to more immersively visualize that and enable sales reps to go in and say, hey, I'm fixing this car, but I need to see the part that's part of this carburetor. And, how do I visually inspect it? And then we have companies like a large shed company that's in the process of, they want to be able to visualize the shed that's going to be in your backyard and see it and feel it. And so I think if your company has products that are really, equipped to be visualized, I think this becomes incredibly important to delivering a modernized selling experience.
It's huge, and I'm working with a startup on exactly this right now because of the need. It's really an incredible space, and there aren't enough people out there providing enough tools. Yeah. That's
Well, Evan, we like I told you, people are like, "Oh, we're gonna have plenty to talk about," and you could go into these things that they could be an episode within their own topic. So I think we did our best to do a bit of an overview, and we'll do some of these like deep dives into some of these topics. But we like to give people like a last opportunity, any advice or predictions that, like kind of leaving thoughts for, it doesn't matter if they're mature or not mature in the space. But the listeners are a huge range. We've had Amazon B2B people all the way down to like people just starting out. So,
Yeah, I think first off, parting thoughts are, we're really excited about what Zaelab and Trellis are going to do together, and excited to partner with you, Isaiah. I think this is going to be a really fun and exciting and transformative ride to help B2B companies. And then, I think the big thing is, for companies, it's, what's the why, right? Why are you doing this, right? And it goes back to the technology question, right? This isn't just about technology. And, I would encourage, B2B organizations to take a more holistic look at their businesses, right? Across people, systems, processes, and really think about, you can't just mature one of those swim lanes. You have to mature all those swim lanes, and there's a right sequence in order to do that. And, I would encourage businesses that are truly ambitious that want to transform to really think about their businesses, across those dimensions and think about, what does my business need to look like operationally, people, systems, technology, to really move the needle and do something meaningful.
This is awesome.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. And we I think we started the beginning of what will probably be like 5 more episodes.
We'll make a
So
series. So we need to have a special series at some point. We haven't done stuff like
yeah.
that, really.
Oh, well, I think you brought up those ones, automation, nimble. We could each one could be its
That
own
would be great.
episode.
Well, thank you, and once again,
Yeah.
it's a pleasure, and congratulations on this new relationship for Trellis and Zaelab.
Thank you. We're incredibly excited to partner. And Tim, great to do this. And hopefully we'll have an opportunity to do it again.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Evan.
Great, everyone. Bye.